Henry County mother is dead and her estranged husband is behind bars, accused of shooting and killing her.
At 12:15 p.m. on Saturday, October 18th, 2025, a 17-year-old boy made the most horrifying discovery of his life. He found his mother, 39-year-old Rhonda Hairston Lockett, lifeless in her bedroom with a single gunshot wound to her head. The call to 911 was simple: "My mom needs help." But what deputies found when they arrived at 11159 Garrett Road in Ridgeway, Virginia, was a calculated execution. The man who had stood at an altar just 4 years earlier, promising to love and protect Rhonda until death do them part, had made that vow come true in the most twisted way possible. Joseph Chad Lockett didn't just break his wedding vows. He became her executioner. And here's what will shock you. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of rage. This was methodical, planned, and carried out by someone with a criminal history that Rhonda's family never knew existed. What the family discovered after her murder would haunt them forever. Joseph Lockett had been arrested multiple times before their marriage, charges ranging from domestic violence against previous partners to illegal firearm possession. Court records show a pattern of control and violence that Rhonda never saw coming. He had masterfully hidden his past, presenting himself as a changed man who deserved a second chance at love. Before we dive into this case that could save someone's life, I need to ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. If watching this story for free while I spend weeks researching could help you recognize warning signs that save a life, maybe even your own, shouldn't you hit subscribe? Or are you the type who takes but never gives back? Because here's the thing. Every view without a subscription tells me you don't really care about preventing the next Rhonda's murder. The comment section will show me who you really are. The perfect storm that would end Rhonda's life began building months before that fatal Saturday, but nobody saw it coming. What looked like a normal marriage from the outside was actually a carefully orchestrated prison of control. Text messages recovered from Rhonda's phone reveal a woman desperately trying to plan her escape while walking on eggshells around a man who monitored her every move. One message to her sister Desania read, "I can't live like this anymore, but I'm scared of what he'll do if I leave." What the family didn't know was that Joseph was drowning in financial desperation that made him even more dangerous. Bank records seized after his arrest show he owed over $30,000 in gambling debts to multiple creditors. His paychecks from his construction job were being garnished, and loan sharks were calling daily. In his twisted mind, Rhonda represented his meal ticket. Her steady job at Drake Extrusion and her modest savings were keeping him afloat. The thought of losing that financial lifeline through divorce pushed him over the edge. The week leading up to the murder, 3 specific incidents escalated the tension to a breaking point. On Monday, October 7th, neighbors heard shouting from the Lockett home around 11 p.m., Joseph screaming about Rhonda trying to destroy his life. On Wednesday, Rhonda's co-worker noticed bruising on her wrist that she tried to cover with long sleeves. Then on Friday, just 3 days before her death, Rhonda's son Zay later told investigators he heard Joseph on the phone saying, "If I can't have her, nobody can." Police records paint a disturbing picture of Joseph's escalating behavior that the family never fully understood. Between January and September of 2025, deputies had responded to the Lockett residence 4 times for domestic disturbances. Each time, Rhonda downplayed the incidents, telling officers it was just marriage problems and refusing to press charges. What she didn't realize was that she was following the textbook pattern of an abuse victim protecting her abuser, a decision that would ultimately cost her everything. The real horror of Rhonda's marriage became clear only after her death, when investigators uncovered Joseph's calculated manipulation tactics. Phone records show he had been secretly monitoring her calls and text messages using spyware he installed on her device without her knowledge. He knew about every conversation she had with her family, every plan she made, and every thought she shared about leaving him. When detectives examined her phone, they found over 200 deleted messages, all erased by Joseph to cover his tracks and isolate her from her support system. Joseph's manipulation during their so-called honeymoon phase was textbook predator behavior that experts now use as a case study. Within 6 months of their April 2021 wedding, he had systematically cut Rhonda off from her closest relationships. He convinced her that her sister Desania was jealous of their happiness and suggested they limit contact. He made her feel guilty for spending time with her sons from her previous relationship, claiming she loved them more than she loved him. Slowly but methodically, he became her entire world, exactly as he planned. The family's guilt is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of the story, because the red flags were there, hiding in plain sight. Rhonda's mother Linda later revealed that Joseph had insisted on controlling all of Rhonda's finances within their first year of marriage. Her brother Casey noticed that Rhonda stopped calling as frequently and seemed nervous whenever Joseph was around during family gatherings. Even her co-workers at Drake Extrusion mentioned that she had become withdrawn and anxious, constantly checking her phone as if afraid of missing something important. What makes this even more tragic is that Rhonda herself tried to reach out for help multiple times. She had secretly researched domestic violence shelters online and even called the National Domestic Violence Hotline twice in the months before her death. But each time she got close to leaving, Joseph would sense her pulling away and launch what experts call a love-bombing campaign, showering her with gifts, apologies, and promises to change that kept her trapped in the cycle of abuse. The final 7 days of Rhonda's life read like a countdown to tragedy, with each day bringing her closer to both freedom and danger. On Monday, October 7th, Rhonda made the bravest decision of her life. She contacted a divorce attorney and scheduled a consultation for the following week. She had finally reached her breaking point after Joseph flew into a rage when she suggested they attend marriage counseling. That night, she called her sister Desania and whispered into the phone, "I'm done pretending this is love." Tuesday brought the first sign that Joseph knew something had changed. Rhonda's internet search history, recovered by digital forensics experts, shows she had been researching apartment listings and reading articles about safely leaving an abusive relationship. What she didn't know was that Joseph had been monitoring her computer activity for months using hidden software. By Wednesday morning, he was asking probing questions about her plans and becoming increasingly agitated when she gave vague answers. The tension reached a boiling point on Thursday, October 10th, when Rhonda finally told Joseph she wanted a separation. According to her son Zay's later testimony, the conversation happened in their kitchen around 8 p.m. Joseph's response was chilling. He didn't yell or argue. He just stared at her and said, "We'll see about that." The calm, controlled nature of his reaction should have been the biggest red flag of all, because it showed this wasn't an emotional outburst, but a calculated threat. Friday, October 11th, marked the beginning of what domestic violence experts call the most dangerous 72 hours in any abusive relationship, the period immediately after a victim announces their intention to leave. Rhonda spent that evening at her mother's house, telling Linda that she was scared but determined to start over. She made her mother promise to take care of her boys if anything happened to her, a conversation that would haunt Linda forever. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera would later reveal that Joseph drove by the house 3 times that night, watching and waiting. The weekend brought an eerie calm that Rhonda mistook for acceptance. Joseph seemed to have accepted her decision and even helped her pack some belongings on Saturday morning. He was polite, almost gentle, behavior that lulled Rhonda into a false sense of security. What investigators later discovered was that Joseph had spent Friday night researching gun laws and had driven to 3 different pawn shops looking for an untraceable weapon. By Sunday evening, he had acquired the 9mm handgun that would end Rhonda's life just 18 hours later. Sunday night, October 13th, Rhonda had her final conversation with her sister Desania, a phone call that would replay in Desania's mind for the rest of her life. Rhonda sounded hopeful, talking about her plans to move into a small apartment and maybe go back to school to become a nurse. But there was something else in her voice, a tremor of fear she couldn't quite hide. When Desania asked if she was okay, Rhonda paused for a long moment before saying, "Pray for me, sis. I think the worst is behind me, but pray for me anyway." The warning signs that could have saved Rhonda's life were all there, but they required someone trained to recognize them. Domestic violence experts identify several critical red flags in the days before a domestic homicide. The abuser's unusual calm after being told about separation plans, increased surveillance behavior, and most importantly, any attempt to control or manipulate the victim's departure timeline. If Rhonda had known that the period immediately after announcing her intention to leave was statistically the most dangerous time, she might have sought immediate protection rather than staying in the home she shared with her killer. The morning of October 18th, 2025, Joseph Lockett woke up with murder on his mind, and the forensic evidence proves this wasn't a spontaneous act of rage. Digital analysis of his cell phone shows he set his alarm for 5:30 a.m., 3 hours earlier than usual, and spent the early morning hours deleting text messages and clearing his browser history. Security footage from a gas station 2 miles from their home captures him purchasing zip ties and a small tarp at 6:45 a.m., items that suggest he had planned to dispose of evidence and possibly Rhonda's body. What makes this even more chilling is that Joseph went through the motions of a normal Saturday morning, even making Rhonda coffee and asking about her plans for the day. Neighbors later reported seeing him washing his car in the driveway around 9 a.m., waving pleasantly when they walked by. He was establishing an alibi of normalcy while internally counting down to the moment he would pull the trigger. Phone records show he made several calls that morning to establish his whereabouts, including one to his mother and another to a co-worker about weekend plans. The actual murder happened at approximately 11:45 a.m., just 30 minutes before Rhonda's son would return home from running errands. Joseph waited until Rhonda was in their bedroom, folding laundry, a detail that speaks to his calculated timing. The single gunshot wound to the back of her head indicates she never saw it coming, never had a chance to fight or flee. Forensic analysis shows the weapon was fired from less than 3 feet away, and gunshot residue on Joseph's hands and clothing confirmed he was the shooter. What Rhonda's 17-year-old son witnessed when he returned home at 12:15 p.m. was a scene deliberately staged to look like a break-in gone wrong. Joseph had ransacked the bedroom, overturned furniture, and even broken a window from the inside to simulate forced entry. But his amateur attempt at crime scene staging fell apart under professional scrutiny. The blood spatter patterns, the position of Rhonda's body, and the lack of defensive wounds all pointed to an execution style, killing by someone she trusted. When Zay found his mother and called 911, Joseph was already 40 minutes into his planned escape route. The forensic evidence that would ultimately seal Joseph's fate was hiding in plain sight throughout the house. Investigators found his fingerprints on the ammunition box hidden in their garage, despite his claims that he had never owned a gun. DNA evidence under Rhonda's fingernails proved she had scratched him during a struggle that Joseph never admitted happened. Most damning of all was the discovery of a handwritten note in Joseph's vehicle during his arrest, containing a detailed timeline of Rhonda's daily routine, and the phrase, "Saturday morning is best," underlined twice, proving premeditation beyond any reasonable doubt. Joseph Lockett's 2-day flight from justice was far from random. He had carefully planned his escape route and enlisted help from people who would later regret their involvement. Cell phone tower data shows he drove directly from the crime scene to his brother Marcus Lockett's house in Bassett, Virginia, approximately 23 miles away. Marcus would later tell police that Joseph arrived around 1 p.m. claiming he and Rhonda had a big fight and needed somewhere to stay for a few days. He never mentioned that Rhonda was dead, and Marcus had no idea he was harboring a fugitive until police showed up at his door. What shocked investigators was the contents of Joseph's car when they finally arrested him on Monday evening. Hidden in his trunk were 3 disposable cell phones, over $2,000 in cash, and a detailed map of North Carolina with several addresses circled in red ink. He had been planning to flee to Charlotte, where he had contacts from his construction work who could help him disappear. Even more disturbing was a small notebook containing the names and addresses of Rhonda's family members, suggesting he may have been considering additional violence before his capture. The most chilling discovery came from Joseph's confession during his interrogation, details that investigators never released to the public but were documented in court filings. Joseph admitted that he had been planning Rhonda's murder for over 2 weeks, ever since she first mentioned wanting to separate. He revealed that the morning of the murder, he had actually pointed the gun at his sleeping wife twice before losing his nerve. It wasn't until she started talking about her excitement for her new apartment that he finally pulled the trigger, telling detectives, "She was so happy to leave me. I couldn't let her have that satisfaction." Joseph's surrender at 225 Niblet Drive wasn't the peaceful conclusion it appeared to be in news reports. According to police body cam footage that was sealed by the court, Joseph barricaded himself in the bathroom of his friend's house and spent nearly 3 hours on the phone with his estranged father, crying and threatening to kill himself. He only came out when his father convinced him that suicide would hurt his own children, who were already traumatized by what their father had done. His final words before being handcuffed were not remorse for Rhonda's death, but a complaint that she drove me to this. What makes Joseph's capture even more significant is what investigators found on his person during the arrest. Hidden in his jacket pocket was Rhonda's wedding ring and a photograph of their Las Vegas honeymoon that he had been carrying as some sort of twisted trophy. These personal items, combined with his detailed confession and the overwhelming physical evidence, painted a picture of a man who killed not in passion, but in calculated revenge against a woman whose only crime was wanting to be free. The tragedy of Rhonda's murder becomes even more devastating when domestic violence experts examine the multiple intervention points where her life could have been saved. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a leading researcher on domestic homicide prevention, reviewed the case files and identified at least 7 critical moments when proper intervention could have changed the outcome. The first missed opportunity came during the initial police responses to their home. Officers should have recognized the pattern of escalating domestic calls and mandated a risk assessment rather than simply mediating what they assumed were minor marital disputes. The most significant missed opportunity occurred just 2 weeks before Rhonda's death, when she visited her family doctor for what she described as stress-related headaches and trouble sleeping. Medical professionals are trained to screen for domestic violence when patients present with these symptoms, especially when combined with unexplained bruising. Had her doctor asked the right questions and provided resources for domestic violence victims, Rhonda might have learned about the extreme danger she faced during the separation period and could have accessed emergency protection services. What's particularly heartbreaking is that Rhonda's workplace had a domestic violence assistance program that she never knew existed. Drake Extrusion Incorporated had partnered with local women's shelters to provide confidential counseling and safety planning for employees experiencing abuse. Her supervisor later admitted noticing changes in Rhonda's behavior, increased anxiety, frequent phone checking, and reluctance to work overtime, but never thought to connect these signs to domestic violence. A simple conversation about available resources could have put Rhonda in touch with experts who understood the lethal risks of leaving an abusive partner. The warning signs that every viewer needs to recognize in their own lives or the lives of loved ones are chillingly clear in Rhonda's case. Extreme jealousy and possessiveness, attempts to control finances and communication, isolation from family and friends, and threats of violence when the relationship is threatened are all predictors of domestic homicide. Most critically, research shows that the risk of death increases by 750% in the weeks immediately following a victim's decision to leave. Knowledge that could have saved Rhonda's life if she had understood the danger she was in and taken appropriate safety precautions. Joseph Lockett's path to justice moved through the Virginia court system with the weight of overwhelming evidence behind it. On November 15, 2025, he entered a plea of guilty to first-degree murder, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, sparing Rhonda's family the trauma of a lengthy trial. The plea agreement included a sentence of life without the possibility of parole plus an additional 25 years for the firearm charges, ensuring he would never again have the opportunity to destroy another woman's life. During the sentencing hearing on December 3, 2025, the courtroom was packed with Rhonda's family, friends, and co-workers who came to honor her memory and witness justice being served. Her brother Casey delivered a victim impact statement that brought the entire courtroom to tears. Rhonda was our sunshine, our strength, our heart. Joseph didn't just kill my sister. He killed our family's future, our children's security, and our belief that love should be safe. But her death won't be meaningless if it saves even one life, if it helps one person recognize the signs we missed. The lasting impact of Rhonda's story extends far beyond the courtroom and her grieving family. Drake Extrusion Incorporated has implemented mandatory domestic violence awareness training for all employees and managers, ensuring that future victims will have the resources and support Rhonda never received. Henry County Sheriff's Office has partnered with domestic violence advocates to provide specialized training for deputies responding to domestic calls, teaching them to recognize the patterns of escalation that were missed in Rhonda's case. Rhonda's story dies with this video unless you help me reach others who need to see this. The question isn't whether you enjoyed this content. It's whether you care enough about other potential victims to take 2 seconds to subscribe and share this with someone who needs to see it. If you don't, I guess I know what kind of person you are, and that's fine. We all make choices about what matters to us. For those who won't subscribe, I'm genuinely curious. Explain to me in the comments why you think this research and storytelling should be free while other people's lives hang in the balance. I'll be reading every single response because I want to understand your perspective.